Before this video begins, I just want to say, yes, we're going to talk about the Laugh Factory incident, but that's not what this video is about. That's just the climax. We've got a whole lot of other stuff to talk about, so let's get right into it, shall we? Seinfeld. To quote a joke that I stole from the Fairly Odd Parents, it's a show about nothing! So how do we know when it's over?
I do!
For 9 seasons, this show dominated NBC's ratings and television ratings in general. No matter where you went, you couldn't escape it. However, when the show ended, that's when the bad things started to happen to the stars. Specifically, the 3 that weren't Jerry Seinfeld. No matter what projects they tried to get attached to, they all ended up failing. Jason Alexander and Julia Louis-Dreyfus ended up bouncing back in just a little bit of time, but Michael Richards didn't really get that. In fact, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. A lot of people will point to the Laugh Factory incident for finally destroying his career. Other people would point to the fact that people only saw him as Cosmo Kramer and wouldn't let him be anything else as a reason that he couldn't get work. But there's actually a lot more to the story than that. Both of those are reasons for his career being destroyed, but they're not the only ones. There's a big one that not a lot of people seem to discuss. And we're gonna get to it right here. So, first of all, Michael Richards got his start as a stand-up comedian. He wasn't ultra successful at it like, say, Jerry Seinfeld, but it was big enough for him to land a spot on the show Fridays. In fact, this is actually what got him discovered by none other than Weird Al Yankovic. He was making a new movie with Orion Pictures called UHF. Speaking of UHF, this leads me to my theory as to why Michael Richards doesn't like the film. Before I get into this, I need to preface this little statement by saying that UHF is amazing. It's in my top 10 favorite movies, no question. But what is it really? Well, it's a low-budget B-movie that was made by a faltering studio and being spearheaded by Weird Al, the guy that made Eat It and Another One Rides the Bus. To someone like Michael Richards, who's an intense method actor, and someone who takes his craft as seriously as you possibly can, is this the kind of thing he'd want to do? Is this something he'd want to look fondly on? I don't think so. It couldn't be a serious movie. It's just some silly fly-by-night little thing that, funny enough, would probably air on the U62 channel in the movie itself. As for things like Seinfeld, it's a lot more, I guess, conventionally attractive in terms of comedy. It's not as niche or out there as something like UHF. And the Michael Richards show, well, what it was supposed to be was something similar, but it ended up becoming, this. Richards was the first choice to play the goofy janitor character Stanley Spadowski. After a lot of work, they finally managed to get him on board, and he didn't really have a great time. Oh sure, he was given a lot of freedom, like being able to improvise almost all of his lines.
I guess you know why I called you in here?
Because you're lonely?
But overall, he didn't have a good time on set, and to this day, if you mention it to him, he won't be very happy. We're not really sure why this is the case, but I have a theory. Sadly though, we'll have to wait to discuss that in a few minutes. UHF was not a big hit. Like I said, it basically destroyed Orion Pictures. Still though, Michael Richards got some very valuable experience, and now he can put on his resume that he was in a feature film. A little while later, this little-known comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, was making a show with NBC. And it was going to be a show about nothing.
Nothing!
Except it was actually about something.
No, nothing happened!
But they just billed it as nothing. Yeah, a lot of people have already discussed that, so moving on.
No.
Originally, they had another actor in mind for the role of Cosmo Kramer, Jerry Seinfeld's wacky neighbor from across the hall who's always up to some weird shenanigans. However, Michael Richards ended up coming into the auditioning room and blew them all away. He brought this unmatched energy that none of the actors were able to replicate. Maybe he got a little bit of this from Stanley Spadowski, who knows? But what we do know is that this is what got him the role of Kramer. And he was on Seinfeld for all 9 seasons in every episode. Yeah, this is a pretty big deal, right? Of course it is, and Michael Richards wasn't about to screw it up.
Taking care of business.
He took Seinfeld way too seriously.
George.
Okay, do that again.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Please.
Everyone on set knew this too. Even Michael Richards had to come clean about this years later, saying that even though he had a blast on the show, he really needed to lighten up. What exactly did he do? Well, there's a number of things, actually. Much like Jared Leto when he played his unforgettable role of the Joker. I said unforgettable, not good. He was a firm method actor, and he wouldn't break character for any reason, not even if you messed up. Speaking of messing up, that was Michael Richards' least favorite thing about the Seinfeld process, especially one of his co-stars, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. A lot of the times when she would say a funny line or where there was an awkward pause, she would get a case of the giggles, and Richards would not react well at all. There are a lot of Seinfeld bloopers that are on the DVDs, and if you watch them, you'll see Jason Alexander, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, or Jerry Seinfeld go, that was a funny mess up, alright, let's try again. But then you'll see Michael Richards go, okay, yeah, stop laughing, come on, let's go! No time for laughing, no time for goofing off, everything has to be done right and right now. This didn't create animosity amongst the cast, they just saw him as a very strange individual. In fact, Estelle Harris, the woman who played Mrs. Costanza, called him a nut, but clearly did so in an affectionate way. People knew not to disturb Richards on set. He was always rehearsing, always thinking of ways to make the scene even bigger and better. While the cast and crew loved him, this got him a reputation of being very difficult to work with. Honestly, I don't think that's undeserved. If you just watch the bloopers, you'll kind of see him as a bit of a jerk. But again, with all these testimonies, it's clear that he's a nice guy. But there was a reason he was popular on the set of Seinfeld and not popular on the vehicle of his next show, which we'll talk about soon, The Michael Richards Show. That's because he wasn't in charge. People were able to keep him in check, and most of all, he knew his place. Richards has gone on record multiple times stating that he loves and respects Jerry Seinfeld. Obviously, that had to have stemmed from when he first auditioned for the show, so he didn't want to ruin it for Jerry and, of course, not for himself. It ended up paying off because Kramer became the most recognizable character in all of Seinfeld. Now, I'm not saying he's my favorite, that's definitely George because he's George, come on. But whenever you see Jerry Seinfeld, you're gonna go, okay, yeah, that's Jerry Seinfeld. He's the stand-up guy, and he just so happens to be in this show or movie. When you see Alexander or Dreyfus, you'll go, oh yeah, they're those people from Seinfeld, but hey, look, they're melting into this role really well. But for some reason, when you see Michael Richards in something else, you're always gonna see him as Kramer. Even when he's not being a Kramer-type character, which, to be fair, he is a lot. We'll talk about that again with the Michael Richards Show. I think it's because physically, he's really distinct. He has that specific look that not a lot of other people have. That and his stature and his voice just give off the impression that it's Kramer again, no matter what you do. This is what Ed Harris went through too. You don't know who that is? Well, now you know him as Jay Pritchett or that octopus from Finding Dory, but he used to be Al Bundy on Married with Children. Again, it's because he's so visually and audibly distinct that you can't separate him from his starring character. In fact, it got so bad for Harris that he had to be removed from a drama movie because even though he was a serious guy in a serious scene, everyone in the testing audience laughed because they said, hey, it's Al Bundy! So imagine what this would have been like for Michael Richards when Seinfeld ended and the Seinfeld curse kicked in. Playing the most distinct character and generally being the most distinct guy on and off the set, Richards had his work cut out for him, that's for sure. Luckily, though, his friends at NBC and some former writers for Seinfeld were gonna help him out. They created this new show called The Michael Richards Show, a title that makes absolutely no sense because Michael Richards doesn't play Michael Richards, he plays a character by a totally different name. I guess they're trying to cash in on his name's popularity or something? But that's the least of the show's problems. The show is about Michael Richards playing a private eye investigator who always dresses up in these crazy disguises to get the job done. The show originally envisioned Richards' character to be kind of a smooth-talking wise guy who was a little eccentric but not too much. They wanted Richards to get away from the Kramer character, but NBC didn't see it that way. They wanted him to be just like Kramer, so a lot of the scripts were rewritten to have him be more eccentric and jittery and just an overall wacky kind of guy. Basically, it's just Kramer again, but with a different name. And a lot of people saw the show as exactly that. The Michael Richards show was a gigantic failure because a lot of people wanted to skip it. It's Kramer again. Don't try to fool us. We know what we're getting. We've been getting it for the last 9 years. And the show itself is very hit and miss. During the times of the scripts where Richards' character is a lot more suave like he was supposed to be, it's really funny. But then when he's acting like Kramer, it's just, ugh. It kind of feels like someone's Seinfeld fanfiction most of the time, and that's not good. Especially considering the fact that Richards' star was on the rise, and the fact that there was a lot of Seinfeld alumni that were working on this show. It really should have and could have been better than this, but it wasn't. Still though, the writing wasn't the only thing that made the show a disaster. According to some of the cast, Richards was a nightmare, even worse than Seinfeld. He had a quote-unquote warped vision of what the show was supposed to be. Now, the report was very vague about what exactly this means, but given the fact that we know Michael Richards' psychological profile now, I think we can make an assumption that he kind of thought the show was going to be bigger than it was. It's his show. It's his chance to make it big. He was Kramer, for crying out loud. You're going to tell him not to do the show this way? Come on, he's the star. This is what cemented Richards' reputation of being hard to work with. Whenever you hear the name Michael Richards, you always think about, oh, yeah, he's going to be really mean to people on set. He's going to be very bossy and argumentative, and he's going to take things way too seriously. Yeah, let's not hire him for this role. He might be dangerous. From then on, he had a very difficult time getting a role in anything, really. He even got offered the title role in the series Monk, which, funny enough, was very similar to what his original vision for the Michael Richards show was, but he turned it down. And then when that went on to be a gigantic hit, I'm sure he felt really depressed and started kicking himself for saying no. Think about what it must have been like for this guy. He was on the top of the world with Seinfeld, and then as soon as it ended, everything fell to pieces, and he couldn't pick them back up and assemble them into something new. Not just because other people wouldn't let him, but his own reputation wouldn't either. And again, the reputation was warranted. All of his actions amounted to this. So he had to have known that on some level he brought it on himself. And I'm sure this was beating down on him hard, the fact that everything he's a part of keeps failing and he couldn't find any work. And it all culminated in 2006 when he was doing a stand-up routine at this comedy club known as The Laugh Factory. There was an African-American heckler in the audience who was basically yelling at Michael Richards, calling him a failure, and really just being awful. Like, heckling with jokes is one thing, but this guy was just being nasty. And all these years of failure, all these years of being unable to find the success he once had, they finally took its toll on his psyche. Michael Richards blew up. He would later say that this was an attempt to shock the guy into silence, basically to make him so on edge that he couldn't say anything else. But also, I think it was a short-sighted attempt to just let out all of his frustration. And boy, did he ever. Just roll the clip. I think it speaks for itself.
Walk up your ass! You can talk your brain now, motherfucker! Roll down, he's not
Oh my god.
Alright, you see? It shocks you to see what's buried beneath your stupid motherfucker. What was it called for? It's not called for you to hear on my ass, you cheap motherfucker! You guys have been talking and talking and talking! I don't know.
This guy's going
What's
nuts.
the matter? Is it too much for you to handle?
That killed his career. That was the end. Since then, he's barely been able to find any stable acting work ever. And he's never gone back to stand-up comedy either because he doesn't trust himself to not have another situation like this. Do I think Richards is actually racist? No. But do I agree with what he's saying here? Absolutely not. First of all, please don't use the words he used. Just, that goes without saying. Come on. But secondly, this is not the best way to deal with hecklers at all. Even with people like this, all he really should have just said was, okay, yeah, I've been in a few shows. How many shows do you have? Something like that. Then just kind of shut him out or maybe ask security to get him out if he's really throwing you off. It's not the best look, but it's better than this. But yes, his reputation, his method acting, and all of this at the Laugh Factory all cemented him as being totally done in the industry. All he really had after this was Christie, and that didn't last long either. I kind of wonder what he's up to now, but I think it's going to be pretty hard because a lot of people will only think about the Laugh Factory incident when they think about Richards. Some people will brand him as a racist or a bigot or anything like that. Again, I don't justify what he said, not at all. But I think what we were seeing up there on that stage was a very sad, lost, and frustrated man. Part of the reason Richards was so hard to work with was because he took his acting so seriously. He wanted to make the best product possible, and he clearly loved being a part of each of these productions except for UHF, so he didn't want to blow it. He wanted to contribute everything he had to make them work. For Seinfeld, it totally worked. Look at all the Kramer memes that have popped up recently now that the internet's a thing. And hey, even back then, people would quote him like crazy. But then when he kept putting in that same effort, often with the same shtick, he couldn't make lightning strike twice. Worse than his former colleagues. Like I said, Jason Alexander and Julia Louis-Dreyfus ended up bouncing back not too long after their projects after Seinfeld failed. Michael Richards never got that. While he wasn't able to find success as an actor or really anything else after this, he does serve as a successful cautionary tale to everybody who wants to join the industry. You can have passion.
No.
You can be a method actor.
No.
You can be all these things that he was. But don't be afraid to lighten up. If you're super uptight about your work, maybe the product will come out good, maybe not, it's hard to say. But you're gonna get a reputation, and unless you're some gigantic S-tier celebrity, people are gonna want to avoid you after that, especially if you're getting typecasted. The best you can do is just kinda roll with it. But don't react to it the same way that Michael Richards did, because if you do, you're gonna end up just like him. Forgotten, unable to work, and with a big scandal that covers the whole rest of your career. Hey guys, it's Future Trevor here. And why do I say future? Well, I recorded this about a year ago. Yeah, it took a while to come out. I'm gonna be honest, the only reason is just because we found other videos we'd rather do and this one got pushed down further and further. Here it is though. At long last, our year-long promise has finally been fulfilled. What'd you guys think? I don't really have any other questions because all I really had in mind was talking about how long this took, so comment below, let me know, because I'm always excited. It doesn't really apply here. And in case you are wondering what these names on the screen are, well, they're the names of our Patreon executive producers. And if you'd like to be just like them, then why not donate to the Patreon and see your name listed in every video I make? Well, I and the editors, it's more than a one-person show. Hasn't been that way since early 2020, but anyways, thanks for watching, friends. I'll see you guys next time.